So here's our agenda for tonight. If you have suffered through one of my public meetings before, you know I love history, so we're going to talk a little bit about some history, talk a little bit about the introduction and background to the pilot, talk about the data collection and analysis, talk about future growth and what it will mean for South Boston in general, and then talk about next steps before turning it over to you. So a little bit about history, and this is something that I learned recently, which is that there used to, way back in the day, actually be a baseball stadium that existed in the Four Point Channel. So if you go to the corner of Thompson and Congress Street, one of the early versions of what were previously the Boston Beaneaters, what later became the Boston Braves, and now the Atlanta Braves, played at a stadium that used to be located right by Thompson Place at Congress Street. So if you go over there, just imagine what used to be in that one location. It's a pretty cool history tidbit. You'll have to excuse me as well. I'm getting over a cold, so if I have a little bit of congestion, apologies on that as well. So a little bit of background. So the reason we did the pilot. So what we looked at is we saw a substantial issue with the number 7 bus, with congestion, with crowding, with people lined up on the street. And so we were looking at the data from this. The number 7 bus experienced higher than normal delay throughout the course of the day, but particularly during the peaks, and is amongst the highest in the entire city. We also know that on Summer Street, it's an uncomfortable condition for a lot of cyclists. So if you're trying to bike down Summer Street before the pilot, you really didn't have a lane the entire way, you're dodging in and out of traffic. We also know that cars sped, in many cases over 40, over 50 miles an hour. And we know that congestion was a key issue for the Port of Boston in a number of areas. So this pilot's origin begins back in 2017. There might have been some earlier iterations of it as well, but really when we started on the BTD side looking at it was back in 2017 with Go Boston. Go Boston recommended a bike lane along the course of Summer Street. There was also a push by Massport in 2017 to begin thinking about a bus truck lane at that point. And Tom Glenn at the time began to put together meetings to that effect. Going to 2018 to 2020, so just before the start of the pandemic, we started to look at the idea of a center running bus lane on Summer Street, but we pulled back on that. The pandemic was a part of it, some pushback from the community was a part of it, and we said, okay, we still know there's a problem, so what is our solution to that problem? So in 2021 and into 2022, we started to look at the idea of a pilot, so a way that we could actually measure the data, understand what the results would look like, and that's what we launched in 2023. So again, this is a pilot that begins by South Station at Dorchester Ave and goes through the Seaport, South Boston waterfront, all the way to East First Street. So that's really the geography of the pilot. It is a bus truck lane, so buses and trucks are allowed to use the right travel lane, and then of course right turners and other vehicles are allowed to at some key locations as well. We had 3 main goals with the pilot. The first was around enabling sustainable mobility, so getting more people to be able to take the bus, getting more people to be able to bike if they chose. We were also looking at improving safety, especially for bikes and pedestrians. As I mentioned, speeding has been a major issue on the street. And third, we were looking at accommodating economic activity, so improving port and maritime access and opportunities for people to work and commute to the seaport easier. We've had what I hope is a robust public engagement process, but open to hearing feedback about how this process could be made better. We started with 3 open houses back in the spring of 2023. We had office hours. We've had coordination with different civic and interagency partners along the way. We have had a number of meetings up to this point. So this is our 3rd of 3 public meetings around the outcomes of the pilot. We also had a survey, and we are looking again at getting that continuous feedback about the pilot and hearing from people and what they have to say, without trying to sugarcoat any of the feedback or sugarcoating any of the data. So a little bit about data collection. So this is a very brief summary of the data that we've collected. We have more slides in the appendix if you want to learn more about the data and the data collection process, but we've been collecting data around a few key areas. So first is traffic. So how is traffic operating? From before the pilot, so how is it operating on Summer Street before this started? We have traffic counts from intersections. We have GPS data that's commercially available. We have transit data that we collect from the MBTA and from some of those commercially available GPS providers. We have information on bikes and bike counts. We have field observations, so our staff did over 40 field observations over the course of the pilot. And then we have feedback from agencies, stakeholders, and of course the community that we're considering. And all of this data is either has been posted on the BTD website or will be very soon. We're still collecting all of it and trying to post it. But if you want to see it, the raw data is there. If you want to pour over spreadsheets of traffic analysis, I would not recommend it unless you want to fall asleep, but it's there for your enjoyment. So a little bit about the data. So there are 4 main findings with the pilot. So the first finding is that we have seen an improvement to bike and pedestrian safety. I'll get into some of the details in a minute, but we are generally seeing slower vehicle speeds, and we're also seeing higher bike activity. The second thing, we know that there are some travel time increases for motorists. I'll get into what the data looks like in a minute, but in general, there have been some travel time increases. We also know that compliance has been a major challenge for us. If you've been on Summer Street, you have seen that compliance has been a challenge. And then the fourth area is that we have seen an inconclusive result in terms of transit data. So transit has improved slightly at certain times of the day, gotten slightly worse at other times of the day, but in general has remained pretty consistent within the margin of error. So a bit about the data. So why do we care about speeding? So this really comes down to pedestrian fatalities at certain speeds. So as I mentioned, Summer Street has been historically a very fast street. And just again, thinking about a pedestrian who's trying to cross the street, a person who's speeding who's going at 20 miles an hour, if they hit a pedestrian, there's a 90% chance that person will live. Go up to 30 miles an hour, it's about a 50-50 shot, and then at 40 miles an hour, it's a 1 in 10 shot that they'll live. Now, Summer Street, before the pilot, I apologize for the formatting here, but before the pilot, 1 in 4 vehicles were traveling over 40 miles an hour. So if they hit a pedestrian, there would be a 90% chance that person wouldn't make it. When the pilot began, within 1 month, we saw that number went down to 8%. So 8% of vehicles after the pilot were speeding on Summer Street over 40 miles an hour. And then within 5 months, that remained relatively consistent. It dropped down to about 7%, but again, pretty consistent when you go from 8 to 7 within that same period. So around a 73% decrease in extreme speeding over the course of the pilot. So a bit about bikes. So we have a number of bike counts and bike data, but just to highlight one area that is that we were able to sort of show with some pretty conclusive results. So before the pilot began, so January of 2023, we saw that there were about 88 bikes using Summer Street at D Street. That was based on actual traffic counts. And then by 2024, so after the pilot, on a very similar day, and again, this is January, so this is when bike counts would naturally be lower, we saw the number went up to 151 bikes using it. So 71% increase over the course of pre-pilot to post-pilot. We also looked at blue bike data. So blue bikes on Summer Street, or I should say within a quarter mile of Summer Street, and we looked at all the docks near Summer Street to see if there was a change in the dock usage near Summer Street. So we know that there was a substantial increase in blue bike usage between April of 2023 and April of 2024 system-wide. We attribute a lot of that to e-bikes and the introduction of e-bikes to the system. But within the Summer Street area, that number was even more pronounced. So system-wide, it was 20%, and near Summer Street, it was 39%. On a typical weekday, so a Wednesday and Thursday, so the days that we have the highest blue bike usage, a blue bike dock at the South Boston Branch Public Library was typically all checked out. And again, that shows that there's probably some latent demand for bike usage in the neighborhood. Unsurprisingly, cyclists tended to like this. So we had a lot of quotes in the surveys from cyclists who said, yeah, this thing is great, we like it. There's still some challenges, but in general, this has been a good process. Now the traffic. So just a reminder of Summer Street before the pilot. So before the pilot, Summer Street was a congested street. We saw this through the data that we collected before the pilot, so traffic counts. We saw this through the GPS data that we collected. And we also know it from just going out and observing, seeing how the street worked before the pilot. We also know that it was not a safe street. So there were a number of instances along Summer Street where there were wide open cross sections off peak, and you would typically have people speeding. So what we did is we compared before and after traffic counts. And the numbers are actually pretty consistent. So you'll see on Summer Street that there's a seasonal variation to traffic, to transit, just to usage in general. It tends to be a bit higher in the fall and in the spring. It tends to be a bit lower in the winter and in the summer. But between January of 23 and January of 24, the number of vehicles using the street remained relatively consistent. Truck volumes also remained pretty consistent on the street, but we saw a slight shift in truck traffic to the PM, but again, relatively small. And your typical driver, based on GPS data that we collected, which is commercially available, and again, the raw data is available on our website if you want to take a look at it. Your typical driver saw anywhere from a 40-second change in their trip time to a 90-second change in their trip time. So you can still travel down Summer Street at a relatively good clip for a dense urban area. Tonight, it took some of my colleagues about 7 minutes to drive from downtown out to East First. But again, there will be some times during the day when there's increased congestion, and that you will see that increase in travel time over the pre-pilot condition. So that 90 seconds is about what we would see for a typical maximum increase in the travel time based on the data that we collected. Before the pilot, we know that there was congestion in some key areas. So there was congestion at the Reserve Channel Bridge. There's also congestion at Melcher Street. And this is from March of 2023. And then if you look at March of 2024, we saw some additional areas of increased congestion. So there was some increased congestion on Summer Street in some specific areas that changed during the pilot. As you can imagine, a lot of drivers gave us negative feedback on the comment cards that we received, on the survey results we received. No surprise there, but this is a sampling of a few that we saw. And you can, of course, go to our website if you want to see all of the comments. They are listed there. We didn't attribute names to them, but you can at least see what people provided as comments. Now on to transit. So historically, there's been a significant amount of delay on Summer Street for transit. So a 7-bus passenger is among the most delayed in the entire city if you look at that 7-bus passenger compared to other riders across the entire city. Hence why we decided to try this pilot. Typically on Summer Street, there's about 380 buses per day operating in both directions, of which 140 are MBTA vehicles in service. So some MBTA vehicles that use Summer Street as a deadhead run, but again, 140 in-service trips. There's other buses that are operating there as well, some private shuttles that get collected in the data, some off-service vehicles that are going to places like Yankee Coach, Greyhound, and so forth. And what we saw from the data for the pilot, for buses, was a pretty inconclusive result. So inbound travel times roughly remain the same, with a 10-15 second on average change in some areas. We heard a lot from riders and bus drivers that the non-compliance was a major issue for the bus truck lane. We also know that there are some key congested areas that are slowing bus service down, largely because of that non-compliance of the bus truck lane. In terms of ridership, we saw a sort of seasonal variation with the 7-bus, much like we do with driving. So when we initially launched the pilot back in December, we started to collect data. We saw that ridership was starting to tick up, but we also know that ridership started to go down in the spring. It, though, tracked the other buses that we were using as a comparison group. So we were looking at the number 4, the number 7, the number 9, and the number 11, and trying to see, was the 7 performing any differently from the other buses that are operating on the street? Turns out the ridership changes are about similar to the other comparable routes on the street, reflecting that seasonal change. As mentioned before, travel time has remained about the same. I won't try and go into this graphic in too much detail, but in general, we can see that there have been some very slight improvements at certain times of the day, but again, within the margin of error largely. So what have our challenges been? So our challenges have largely been around things like enforcement. We've tried to address that by having some increased enforcement during certain times of the day, but we still saw that there have been issues and non-compliance even after we did some enforcement with the police department. We've tried to work with some of the stakeholders along the street to address some of these challenges. So, for example, working with the BCEC to get some additional striping that they requested, working with Massport to think through some striping issues, working with the adaptive signal system, working on additional signage. But again, these have been things that we've been trying to work on throughout the scope of the pilot. So a little bit about future growth and implications for Summer Street. So there is still going to be a need to think about better transportation into and out of the Seaport District because of growth. So at the end of the day, by 2030, we're anticipating that there'll be about 31,000 people who will be living here, 89,000 people who will be working here. So this will make it the second biggest jobs hub in the entire city. If we want to think about a way that these people, all of these commuters, are going to get into the seaport, we have to think about more productive means than them all driving or taking Ubers or taking Lyfts, because the roads simply won't handle that amount of congestion and that amount of growth. A single bus lane can, in theory, hold about 20,000 people an hour. A single lane of expressway can handle about 2,500 cars per hour. So the Ted Williams Tunnel, forget about all the traffic going to the airport, the Ted Williams Tunnel and I-90 coming in and out of the seaport can handle something like 5,000 people an hour, which won't get to this 89,000 figure to transport people in and out. So we have to think about ways to get people in and out of the seaport. Again, trying to illustrate this a little bit, trying to think about how 50 people moving by walking, biking, riding a bus, or by car, and you can see that you can use roadway space more efficiently if you're using with these alternative modes. We also know that in the future there will be the MBTA's bus network redesign that will bring more bus service into the neighborhood. So what we're looking at is a future bus connection that will run much more frequently and also have a better span of service over the course of the day. The 7 bus today kind of drops to a very minimum level of service in the middle of the day. It stops at 10 p.m. There's no service on Sundays. In the next few years, the T is going to significantly change and improve 7 bus service, extend it north so that you'll have more access to places in downtown. And that number that I told you earlier, that 140 buses that operate in service on Summer Street today will go to over 250 in the future. So just for a point of comparison, there will be more service here in the future compared to what's out there today. So going back to this point about future growth in the seaport, by 2030, we're anticipating that there will be many, many more people trying to reach this area. We can't accommodate this growth by the existing roadway capacity. We don't really have the space to build more roads because our land use patterns have kind of extinguished any remaining developable spots for roadway space. So we have to think about ways to use this more efficiently. Bus lanes can get us there to a certain extent, but again, we're not going to be building more tunnels. We're not going to be building more roads. So what is the innovative way that we can get there? I'll put that question out to you. If it's not something like the Summer Street bus lane, what are some other things we should be thinking about? So we'd like to hear from you on that. So again, a little bit of a summary. So we had 3 main goals at the start of this pilot process: enabling sustainable mobility, improving safety for bikes and pets, and then accommodating economic activity. When we think about a way to evaluate this, we do see that there's an improvement in the number of cyclists who are using Summer Street. We see that blue bike usage is way up compared to what it was before. And for buses, we see that there's, again, mixed results. We don't have any substantially negative data. We don't have any substantially positive data. But we know that there's a future potential of better bus service coming into the district. And we want to make sure that we plan ahead for that better bus service, because that would be a way that we can accommodate all of those people who are going to be coming here in the future. We also know that safety is an issue. So we have been able to address safety to a certain extent as a result of this pilot. We have decreased the amount of people going over 40 miles an hour, so that extreme speeding figure is down substantially. So we know that that's something that we've been able to look at and say that was a positive result. And in terms of accommodating economic activity, which is the 3rd main goal of this pilot, we know that dedicated bus lanes can accommodate that commuting future into the Seaport District. We know that though the current bus lanes have challenges, so we do need to think about ways to change that. And then port access, we know there have been some slight travel time changes for trucks. We know that the bus truck lanes haven't quite been respected, but again, trucks have likely seen a similar slight increase in their travel times, but we think having the separation from bikes has been a net benefit. So in terms of next steps, so this is our 3rd meeting on the Summer Street pilot. We had one in the Fort Point Channel neighborhood, we had one virtually, and now this one tonight. We are going to continue to coordinate with our partner agencies, so Massport, the MBTA, MassDOT, and so forth. And we are looking at announcing a final determination for the pilot in the late summer. So we're going to hear your feedback over the next few weeks, talk internally, talk with our partner agencies, and then be able to come out with a final determination, hopefully by around Labor Day. So with all that said, I will turn it over to you all for questions and thoughts. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Can you give us any overview
question was around feedback, what we've received so far, and the general sense of what the direction is that we're looking to head in. So I'd say the feedback has been relatively mixed. So we've gotten some positive feedback around the safety, around the biking. We've gotten some negative feedback, especially from drivers, around how the road is being sort of used, how the light timing and cycles have worked. So what we're going to do over the next few weeks is take all of that feedback along with the data and present different recommendations internally to understand what folks think is the best course. So we'll have a few different scenarios that we'll present, and we'll try to understand what we think is the best outcome based on what we hear tonight and what we take back in terms of the data. My inclination is that the current configuration for Summer Street probably won't be the future. We know that there are a number of trouble spots that we want to address. We know that there are a number of locations that we think could be improved. So we're going to look for feedback tonight. We've already received some really good feedback, and we'll look to take that back and come up with a recommendation. Yeah.
My question is, on the feedback of bikers, how many were bikers and how many were non-bikers?
So I don't have the I don't have the split between people who answered by biking or people who answered by driving. The majority of the people who give us feedback were car drivers, but again, I don't have the exact breakdown. I'm sorry, say again?
I tend to think they're all bikers because bikers do not adhere to the rules on L Street. I have to tell you that. And they don't adhere on Summer Street because they're in and out between the cars. So some of your data may be skewed. I'm not saying it isn't. Could be like any poll. That is. And I just would like to know how many people from the city of Boston here came by transportation, public transportation.
Yes, that's a good
Can they
question.
raise their hand? How many came by public transportation here? So they're using vehicles to come here. And you're asking the people of us not to use vehicles. So I don't understand that.
Yeah, so just to clarify about the survey. So the survey was not a scientific poll. We weren't trying to get a 52% of people support this or 52% of people are against this or whatever. What we were trying to do was gather the sentiment and understand what people were saying. And we were very much interested in what people said in these specific feedback. So I heard tonight from a gentleman who was talking to me at the board about the intersection of Dry Dock and Summer Street, how that's been a problem for him as a person who uses a scooter to go up Summer Street. But it was really good feedback because he talked about the traffic situation, he talked about how his experience was, and we're going to be able to use that and also the feedback that we received in the survey to make this project better or determine what the next steps are going to look like. So to your point, we're taking feedback very seriously, but this wasn't a scientific poll. We were trying to understand what the general sense of people's experience was and how that worked for them. The second thing is, we're not trying to prescribe people use one type of mode or another. What we're trying to do is give more people opportunities to use a mode of their choice. So if they want a bike, there's a bike lane. If you want to take the bus, there's a bus lane and the bus service. Hopefully it becomes more frequent, but again, it's there. If you want to drive, there's still the space to drive. And so we're trying to make the street safer. We're trying to accommodate as many different types of users as we can. Councilor Quinn? Yeah. Sure.
Thank you, Matt. Before I begin, I want to recognize Haley Dillon is here from Senator Collins' office, Lydia from Mayor Wu's office, State Representative David Beal is here, Nick Zafarakis from Congressman Lynch's office is also here. Yeah, Shane from David Beal and Charlie Levin from my team as well. I spoke last week, so I didn't want to take too much of the time. But I wanted to highlight a couple issues, and the first one we talked about, that you talked about, Matt, was pedestrian safety and enforcement on Summer Street. And it's been limited enforcement from the Boston Police Department, I understand that. But we want enforcement from the Boston Police on traffic regulations, especially speeding, throughout South Boston, not just on Summer Street. There's not a day that goes by and people see my parents walking up Broadway and a car will go by them and they'll be in the crosswalk. The car will go 30, 40 miles an hour on L Street or 4th Street or 5th Street. And this is a community that supports police officers. We want more police officers. My colleagues on the city council don't necessarily want them, but I advocate for more police every day. And so we need more police. That's part of the solution, I think. The other aspect of it is on this pilot program. The feedback I received from my neighbors in South Boston, they didn't like the community process. They felt that their voices were not heard by City Hall. Not necessarily by you, Matt, by the chief of streets. He didn't seem to be interested in hearing from residents of South Boston about what their opinion is about Summer Street. In fact, I was driving up Summer Street today from Elm Street to Summer Street, and it's poorly designed, as we all know. Even when you're going towards South Station, you're on Summer Street and you come to like Melcher, it breaks down to bus lane on the right, and then there's a left turn on the green arrow, if you notice that, on Melcher Street, and the traffic is blocked. So we can't say that there's no traffic at all because of this pilot program. People in South Boston know that the traffic has increased significantly because of these changes. Again, the poorly designed changes. But my main concern is, again, I don't want to take too much time, is City Hall is not listening to the residents. Their voices are not heard. We would not be having these community meetings if I didn't advocate for them. It was difficult for me advocating all the time to Franklin Hodge, and he'd say, no, we're not having them. And I said, yes, we are having them. We'd go back and forth. Finally, we have a handful of them. But it's not well organized. It's not, the voices of the residents are not heard. We're frustrated. In the pilot program, I think we need to start over, Matt, because it's poorly implemented, poorly designed. Residents especially feel not heard during this process. And, you just haven't listened to the residents, you haven't listened to the community. And I think I speak for a lot of residents in South Boston. I think I also speak for the South Boston elected officials. I'll let them obviously speak for themselves as well, but Representative Beal is here also. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn, for that. I appreciate it, and I apologize, I should have done this earlier. Thank you for recognizing all of the elected officials and staff who are here. And maybe what I can do is just see if anyone from the electeds or the staff want to speak. And yeah, thank you.
Good to see you, Matt. I feel like you and I have had multiple conversations on Summer Street the last several years. I'm interested in hearing from my constituents, my neighbors. I do think there are some problems and flaws in the assumptions that the Summer Street pilot has made. As a former number 7 rider, you made the point earlier of opening up access to the waterfronts. I'd be curious if you surveyed the riders on the 7 to see if they're actually getting off the waterfronts. In my experience, is to get downtown to the financial district for final work destinations. It's not an access to the waterfront for places of work. So curious to see if you have any data to bear out that comment. Also, talking about planning for the future, responsible planning, I think the Summer Street pilot undermines a lot of the planning the city has done in years past. For anybody familiar with Article 80 projects, transportation studies have to be done to identify impacts from a proposed project. And every project that's been proposed along Summer Street and along the waterfront never accounted for taking away half of Summer Street for a bus truck lane. So, I think you're undermining studies that have been done on proposals that the city's already approved. Additionally, taking away half of Summer Street for a problem that's during commuting hours seems a little bit of an overreach. The 7 runs a limited schedule on Saturday, doesn't run on Sunday, but those days, right now, you're not supposed to be in a bus lane. That seems like overkill to me. And lastly, it's been reported in other parts of the city that the city of Boston wants to hear from residents directly before implementing a bus lane. This came across very heavy-handed and top-down. That's disrespectful to me, my neighbors, my community, that you're not willing to engage with us to have these conversations, but putting this on us from a top-down approach. So look forward to hearing from the rest of my neighbors today. But also, sorry, one last comment. You talk about drivers. This is a corridor that is home to the Port of Boston. It's home to the Marine Industrial Park. They're not just drivers, these are economic engines in our marine industrial parks in the Port of Boston, which I think had almost $1 billion in investment to keep it running. So, not all roadways are configured the same way. What works in theory in other parts of the city may not be a right fit here, and I think the city's lack of awareness around that is problematic.
Thank you very much, Representative Beal. Just to respond to the direct question you had asked about surveying people and who's getting on and off the 7. So we did a number of surveys where we tried to interact directly with bus drivers. So a lot of those responses are posted online, and we can look to see what people said exactly about their origin and destination. We also have some of the data from the T. I don't have it here tonight, but I can follow up with you to sort of get that exact number of people who are getting on and off at the stops along Summer Street. The one thing that we're looking to do with the T is adding a new stop for the 7 for the new summer steps that just opened up. So if you're familiar with those, they are between what's called 400 Summer, so West Side Drive by the Convention Center, and the next street down, which is A Street. They provide that vertical access to the lower part of the South Boston waterfront. So we're looking at adding a stop there so that people can actually make it up towards points that are further into the seaport by Seaport Boulevard. So hopefully we can provide more access for people, because to your point, the stops now are maybe not spaced as well as they should be, especially for a growing part of the city. So yeah, thanks for those points, and we appreciate your feedback. So I just wanted to check, any other elected officials or staff want to make statements before I turn it over to the rest of the crowd? Fantastic. Sir, I believe you were the one.
I'm worried about the speeding on Summer Street. I don't think increased enforcement or restricting lanes is a feasible answer. Why don't you just put speed humps? I've been going over speed humps everywhere here, and it's to reduce speed. Summer Street is the widest, one of the widest streets in South Boston. Why don't you just put speed humps up? Every single person that goes over that speed hump slows down. Why don't you just put speed humps there instead of increased enforcement, reducing the lanes? That's what I was wondering. Why don't you do that? You have them here on these streets right here. So and it's low money. You don't have to pay extra cops to pay them to increase enforcement, and maybe open up a lane or something. I know that every single person that goes through a speed bump slows down. I don't know why that wasn't even considered to slowing down the traffic. That's my suggestion.
Yeah.
Any feedback? What do you think?
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. So, as the gentleman pointed out, we have a new safety initiative within my department, which is to put speed humps on a number of city streets. If you notice, those streets tend to be smaller residential streets. Our current policy is not to put them on what we call arterials. So arterials are, I'll explain in a second. Our arterials are the major streets. So think about the streets where you have a lot of bus traffic, truck traffic, because those larger vehicles, and fire trucks and ambulances use them as well, those larger vehicles have a tough time with speed humps. So that's our policy now. It's not to say it can't change, but that is the city's current policy. So we heard back. Let me finish talking, sir. Understood. I'll let you have a follow-up. Just let me finish. So what we know is that from our public safety officials, from the MBTA, from the trucking community, there's opposition to putting in speed humps on major arterials. Again, this is what we've heard as feedback. We are certainly open to different feedback, like the gentleman's providing, but that's currently the city's policy. So, sir, did you have a follow-up question?
Matt, I just wanted to add one thing. Is at a city council budget meeting 3 weeks ago, or a month ago, I specifically asked the fire commissioner that question. Do you oppose speed humps on major streets such as L Street, Broadway, or Summer Street? He said, no, it has no impact at all. Certainly the fire truck has to slow down and go over the speed hump, but it doesn't impact their response time. So Franklin Hodge mentioned that the other night, 2 weeks ago, and I corrected him. And I put that on my Twitter page of the video, and Commissioner Burke, the fire commissioner, said, no, it does not impact public safety at all, and he's not opposed to it. So I just wanted to provide that information.
Yeah. Again, that's current city policy, it's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but I hear your feedback, and I'll certainly put that into the sort of discussion. Thank you, Councilor. Thank you, sir. Sir, in the back.
I drive my wife in twice a week. It used to be 10 in, 10 out. Now it's 40 minutes. 20 and 20 sometimes. Those Sealand trucks, they had 1,800 trips a month, a week. Now it's up to 2,700. They upped it once the containers. That bridge is not built for heavy-duty trucks. The guy that I talked to, when he built it, said the trucks are going to kill this bridge.
Sorry, which bridge?
That's the bridge
reserve channel?
Sealand. Last time I was out, it was out 20 years before they fixed it. That's no lie. That bridge was down for 20 years. You went all the way around Pappas. If I own Pappas, I'll tell you, find another route. You're not coming this way. But it's ridiculous, because this is slowing traffic down. You want traffic to get out of here, get in and get out.
As far as I know, the bridge was built for trucks because of the access to the port. And you're talking about the bridge that goes over the reserve channel, the Flynn Bridge?
The small bridge, right there, right after the Edison. And then the Edison's gonna have, what, 1,000 units built?
Summer Street Bridge.
Yeah, so the Summer Street Bridge is exactly over the reserve channel. So yeah, to the best of my knowledge, that was go for trucks. I'm not sure where that information came from, but I haven't heard anything
That
different.
bridge
because of
is
the
on
access
the
to
water,
port.
went right up to it.
Sir.
Hi, we went over a lot of information, but I'm going to focus on Summer Street. I'm kind of suspicious on a lot of your data. So you take away 50% of the space, but yet everything kind of remains the same. Buses save, you said 13 minutes at rush hour?
No, I mean, again, it's a very small change. It's like 15 to 20 seconds.
Okay, and so for the small period of rush hour, this might be an advantage to the bus, but for the rest of the day, there's zero advantage, but disadvantage to all the drivers. I talking to one of your co-workers, so all the lights have been changed to make it more difficult to make the next green light, so you're backing traffic up. You've removed all the right-on reds, and actually, as your worker told me, you're kind of beyond the threshold of what the federal government allows. You're supposed to have a certain percentage of right-on reds for fuel saving. Is that correct?
So the federal government doesn't have explicit indication of when right-on reds are supposed to be allowed or not. The city of Cambridge recently banned all right-on reds. They've been banned in New York City for years. So we have a new city policy where we're looking at safety and pedestrian volume. And what we do is we ban rights on reds based on two things. So we ban them based on pedestrian volumes. So pedestrians are above a certain threshold during peak periods. And the second reason we ban them is because it's for bike safety. So if bikes are coming up the street, you don't get a person who turns right into the bike. So those are the two reasons that we would look to ban a right on red in Summer Street.
Right, so when you could take a right on red, there wasn't a walk sign for pedestrians, but now you can take a right on green, but they have a walk sign. So I'm not sure that that argument actually holds any water. Doesn't seem to make any sense at all. According to the National Highway Transportation and Safety Administration, of the 57% of pedestrian and vehicle entanglements, 43% involves some type of impairment, 13% is driver impaired, 24% is pedestrian impaired, and 6% is a combination. And all the focus seems to be on the cars. There's no enforcement whatsoever on the bikes. You put up the little bike traffic signals that none of them pay attention to. They don't pay attention to the regular red lights, they don't pay attention to anything. The split lanes, there's zero enforcement. Zero enforcement on bikes. Well, so there's zero enforcement on pedestrians who cross all the time. Not everyone's in the crosswalk, most of them aren't. But you're doing nothing on that. You're impeding commerce. The roads are meant for commerce. Whether you're going to work to produce something, going to buy something, going to deliver something, and you're basically choking all of that off. And a good example would be State Street, which I think you now have, 50% vacancy rate on the first level retail stores. It doesn't work. You're catering, you're making 99% of us suffer for a handful of people. Your statistics are skewed in the way you present them by showing percentages. Tell us the actual number of bike riders. Telling me something went up 600% doesn't mean anything.
No, I mean, that's fair. So here, 68. So bear with me for a second. We actually do with figures in here. You can go online and you can see these figures as well. So these are the actual numbers of bikes in January who were at the intersection of D and Summer. So this is the change between 2023 and 2024. So these are, so what we do, and sure, we can look at data. So if you look at how we collect the data, if you'll bear with me for a second as I go through this. Data collection. So the way we do traffic counts. So traffic counts a number of different things, a number of different users on the road. So what we do is we look at everyone who's using the roads. We look at heavy vehicles, so trucks and buses. We look at general purpose traffic, so sedans or SUVs. We look at bikes, and we look at pedestrians. And we can actually look, we have cameras that count just the number of vehicles that are moving through the intersection, making turns. And then if you want to look online, all of the data is online from when it was collected. So you can look hour by hour how many people were using Summer Street, or you can look over the course of the entire day. And so that's how we do traffic counts. It's literally there's a camera, and the camera takes that data and spits out a number. And then we use our data team to interpret those numbers for us.
So I drive Summer Street 4 to 6 times a day in town and back. And the vast majority of the time, I don't see any bikes. I find it hard to believe that there's 600 bikes using that road on a typical day.
Yeah.
I just don't believe it.
So, yeah, so check out our website if you want to check out the data sheets. But those are the numbers we collected. And it was done by a reputable company. So I apologize if that's not clear, but that's how we collected the data.
Well, yeah, I don't think anyone sees that. Anyone who uses these roads don't see that kind of usage. So I can believe what I see, or I can believe what you're telling me.
So yeah, a few things. One, in terms of speed humps, thinking of standing on the 7 bus, you got like up to 60 people on a bus when you're at full capacity. And standing and going over a speed hump doesn't really sound nice when you're jam-packed on a bus. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing is speeds. Yeah, the data shows that before this, 95% of cars were speeding. And so in terms of the bus lane, you might say, like, why have a bus lane on a Sunday afternoon when, or like at a time of not peak, at a non-peak hour, why have a bus lane? It's because 95% of cars were speeding when there wasn't one. So keeping the bus lane even at non-peak times helps improve the safety. Yeah, and the third thing is I started biking on Summer Street 10 years ago. When I was 15, I had to go to my summer job. And I hated it. Like, it was my first time ever biking in Boston. It was the easiest way for me to get my job. I wasn't old enough to drive. It would have taken 2 buses and 2 trains to get 4 miles. So I biked, and I still bike now. But the point is that for 10 years, biking on Summer Street was my least favorite road anywhere near South Boston. It's horrible. And this is so much better. Like, I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. I used to be like the only one, and now I consistently, whenever I'm on Summer Street, I end up like there's someone else in front of me, someone else behind me. I see people coming the other way. And it's really a great improvement for that. And I think like it's going to encourage more people to bike, because I almost didn't when there wasn't one. And if there was one, if it were today, would have been like almost certain that I would have followed through and did what I did in bike places.
What was the speed limit before you changed it?
So the speed limits remain 25 miles an hour.
Well, they're 25 now, but they weren't before. So in your example, you used 40. Wasn't the speed limit 40 back then?
So the citywide speed limit today and before the pilot is 25 miles an hour.
That changed. It used to be 30 on L Street. What was it before? When did the data come out?
So the speed limit's been the same across the entire city since well before the pandemic. I don't remember the exact year, but I believe it was 2017, 2018 when we changed it citywide. And so the entire city is 25 miles an hour, except when it's posted otherwise. On Summer Street, it's been 25 miles an hour since we started this whole pilot process, and well before that. Sure, in the back.
Just like to share what I had nothing better to do this morning. Anyway, so sat at Ellen Broadway, 8 a.m., number 7 bus. 20 people got on board, 20 were on the bus, 86 vehicles went by. 8:07, 25 boarded, 25 approximately on, 79 vehicles went by. Same time, one bike going north, one south. 8:13, 3 people got on the number 7, 10 on the bus, 85 vehicles. One biker north, one biker south. 8:21 a.m. Actually, I have to commend the team. The times are pretty on with their schedule. So 8:21, 28 boarded, 20 on the bus. 103 cars went by. 2 bikers north, 1 south. 8:31, 21 boarded, 25 on the bus. 91 vehicles went by. 2 bikes north, 1 south. 8:49, big gap between there, 8:31, 8:49. 19 boarded, 27 about on the bus. 135 vehicles went by. 3 bikers north, 1 south. Now I shifted down to First Street because, okay, the bikers, maybe the bike lane picks up at First Street. 2 boarded on the bus, number 7, at 9:21 a.m. On the bus, about 25 people, 94 vehicles went by. Little more bike activity, 5 bikers going north, 2 coming south. So what does this add up to? Total bus riders, about 270. Total bike riders, 24. Total car riders, if I add 1.2 people per vehicle, is 841. Total car riders, if I add 1.5 people per vehicle, is 1,009. And we also know those vehicles will increase as we get into more busy time, so there'll be more traffic for the vehicles. So where am I going with that? My first question, so a couple questions. How many buses are you adding this year, next year?
So the MBTA is proposing for bus number redesign to go from about 140 that are out there today to well over 200. And again, we still don't have the exact number, but it probably is looking at about 250 per day. So bus number redesign is a 5-year rollout, and for South Boston, they're looking at 2025 towards the end of the year, or 2026, but they still haven't confirmed the timeline for us yet.
Road, we know, so we know that's probably not gonna happen. We have to put the funds elsewhere, right?
So they're working on phase 1 at the end of this year, and that is funded, and that is happening mostly in communities north of downtown. So phase 1 will roll out in East Boston, Everett, Chelsea, parts of Revere, Everett, I'm sorry, I already said Everett, Charlestown, and parts of Cambridge. So they're doing it by bus garage. They're going to be shifting down at some point, we believe in 2025 or 2026, to the Southampton garage, which would be the buses that operate on Summer Street. So yeah, they're doing it by garage. It's going slower than we would like, but they're still at the end of the tunnel because they're implementing in part already.
We don't have a vehicle problem, you have a bus problem. If you can start putting more buses and people are going to take it, fine. And this is my 4th request now. And you have the data, you look at it, what, 33,000 people in South Boston approximately, so you're talking about 2,000 people on a number 7 bus. I don't know why they take such precedent, 2,000 in, 2,000 out. The other 33,000, how many have to drive to Mass General, to drive to Burlington, drive to Braintree, drive? You have the data, you told me. So how many of the 33 need their vehicles? Not everyone can take the MBTA. How many have to drive out of South Boston? Do you know the data?
Yeah, so to your points, there's a few different ways to get out of the community. Summer Street's not the only way, but it's an important way. And so what we have is we have 17,500 vehicles, give or take, on Summer Street every single day. Some amount of that is cut through traffic. So we have the data on cut through traffic on the Reserve Channel Bridge. It's about 60% of the vehicles that are on the bridge are neither have an origin or a destination in South Boston. And so we know it's pretty substantial, the number of people who are trying to cut through the neighborhood to get to other destinations, whether it's downtown, whether it's the airport, wherever. And so what we can see from that information is that there is a demand for people from Southie to drive. There's a demand for people from Southie to take transit. There's some people who want to bike. But again, we're trying to provide ways for people to get around that are more environmentally sustainable. And we're trying things like this pilot to see how it works. As I told you, some of this data is inconclusive, and we need to understand what the community is telling us, what the data is telling us before coming up with a final determination for things.
I think you get hot data right there.
So again,
You get hot data right there.
Back to what this gentleman said, so, correct, your own data said 20,000 cars on Summer Street?
about 17,500 on a typical day in January. Again, that number is.
And your bikes are 151 a day?
In January, yeah. So in January, we will
Double it, whatever, triple it. I mean, you 20,000 to 400 or 500 bikes. I actually don't have a problem with the bike as much as I do with the bus lane. It's You're creating a lane that just sits there. Anyone knows, it's not broken, don't fix it. Anyone knows, you drive down there, you don't see a bus anywhere, and people are driving in that lane because there's no buses. And the other thing is, you're not forcing the trucks. I'm not saying to force the trucks, but if the trucks are in our lanes, if they're forced in there, that might make a little difference as well, but you're not forcing the trucks either. So it's just been an old saying since 1589, you're putting the cart before the horse. Because we know these mega buses are the number 3, that's going to be years if it even comes at all. If the city turned around and said, we're buying 50 buses and we're going to put them there, maybe different. But again, I don't know if that many people will need to take that bus into town. I have the data from today, it's not going to change that much. Your own data even says it. And can you pull up that one graph about the 89,000 people?
Many people work from home too.
That's my point. The one that had the traffic count over the years after 2017.
I don't know if I have that graph. So these are lane violations. This is transit usage.
After perfect coverage, right there, because we know over, right? So that's perfect telling you about over, because we're over, little people going into the office, so 2019, you have one more. So you're 89,000 people, I don't know if there's going to be that many people going into the city because they're over.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah, you put dividers.
On Summer Street?
Yes.
We certainly look at it if if people think that's a good idea. There already are medians, so, I mean, yeah. Tom?
Thanks, Matt. So, hey everybody, my name is John Tillman. I'm a lifelong resident of South Boston. Live up on 395 East Fifth Street. And I've known Matt for a few years now, and I gotta tell you, he's a good man. He's super accessible on this project. I commend you and your consultant team. I'm in private transportation practice now, but before that, I was the highway administrator for MassDOT. Previous to that, I was the City of Boston's longest-serving transportation commissioner in the city's history. And I get every bruise to prove it. I did want to just touch upon a couple of things that is really Matt knows about because we've talked about it. And I'm focusing on the bus lane and the bus lane only. I'm all for bikes. I love them. I think they're here to stay. I also authored the city's first complete streets guidelines, so you can take me outside and tar and feather me after. But, so Tom Glenn, as you referred to in 2017 with Go Boston 2030, so he and I co-chaired the implementation group. And the findings were that we would look at a bus lane, right? There wasn't anything about implementing it. We would look at it, which you've done. Now, and folks do need to remember that this bus lane, as Matt referred to, was looked at 2 times before. When I was the city's transportation commissioner under Tom Menino, and then Greg Rooney, who was the transportation commissioner under Mayor Walsh. And what we had done is we asked for preliminary data. Show us what happened. And quite frankly, based upon that data, we said, oh no, we can't do that, right? We just can't. And it was a data-driven decision. It wasn't like, oh no, cats and dogs will be living together and the rest of it. We took the data, we made a decision. So, we do have some issues as it relates to this pilot program, which, we've talked about. When you're on a side street, D Street, Melcher, B, and you're coming up on Summer Street, the sign over your head says if you're in the middle lane, you have to take a left-hand turn on a Summer Street. That left-hand turn on a Summer Street pushes you into the bus lane. And we've talked about that, and I know there's multiple jurisdictions, and Matt's, fighting away for us as best that he can. We also asked that the word truck be painted in the bus lane. So the truck driver, we care deeply about the blue-collar workers at the Flynn Cruise Port, at Conley Terminal, the people that supply goods and services to all of us in this Commonwealth and far beyond. And again, I know there's some jurisdictional rigmarole or whatever. me a can of paint, I'll take care of that tonight, but, you know, I mean, respectfully, as Councilor Flynn has said, right, the buses, they run in the morning and they run at noon. And I should point out that I am on average a 2 to 3 time a week number 7 rider. I took it today because we were getting together tonight. I would have waved to my guy grabbing the dab if I knew you were being a stalker, you weirdo. So, and, you know, and he's right? So, and we've talked about this, when you get further towards the seaport, today was a busy day. 8 people got off. Now, everybody's standing on the bus and like sardines, but 8 people got off. And that was by far the most I have ever seen get off there. And I bring that up because this bus, you know, I think you have a 2-3 hour day problem, maybe a 4 or 6 hour day problem. But the solution is to take away access 24/7 for everybody who's not on a bus. I don't think that, you know, I don't think that that's necessarily smart when you have a bus that runs on a Sunday schedule on a Saturday and doesn't run at all on a Sunday. But, you know, we get it, right? So, you know, it feels like there has to be a better way to do this. You know, I mean, the bottom line, I believe, just one guy's opinion. I should also point out, and I should have started with this, that my client is on the hotel. They hired me and they said, hey, take a look at this. And we did a study before the pilot program and we showed it to the city. The city disagreed with our findings, which they have every right to do. And, you know, I do like to think we were borne out a little bit on what we said was going to happen, right? Because, you know, traffic is back. It just is. People are on the buses again. So I do believe that the T needs to run more buses. You know, the 7 is at capacity. I don't know, when you're out there this morning, if you looked at the 9, there's nobody on. You can play wiffle ball on the 9 if you wanted to. There's nobody on it, right? Just throw it on the 7 and run it down Summer Street. But I have to say, you know, Matt is a good man and he's a pal of mine. And he's not our enemy. He's listening and he's taking it all in. And I know for a fact that he's sharing it. And, you know, my hope, though, is that after 6 months, if you have information that is inconclusive, that tells you it's not working, as intended. So, I mean, there I'll just say thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, and, you know, I do think we all have an expectation that you will bring this message back and, you know, always available to you as we've talked about in any way we can. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom, for your partnership throughout this process, because I really do appreciate your thoughts, your feedback throughout this time, and your counsel too. I also appreciate how you and Tommy color coordinated tonight, so nice touch over
We
there.
tried to get Beal in jeans, but he wouldn't do it.
But anyway, no, thanks so much for that. You know, as Tom said, we are certainly here to listen to you. We want to get your feedback, and we're genuine about that. As I said, the data is not what I'd hoped for, but we are presenting it to you as honestly as we were able to analyze it, as honestly as we were able to sort of take those nuggets of information and give it to you and get your response to it. And if, you know, there's still questions about it, if there's still feedback on it, we want to hear that, because this process isn't over. We still have more time, we still have more process to go through, and we're here to listen to you all. So, yeah, thank you for that, Tom, very much. Sir.
Thanks, Matt. Don't take this personal, but your pilot program is like a case study on how not to do a pilot, okay? You implemented this in the dead of winter without consulting anybody in the community, okay? And just all of a sudden, you got this bus lane down Summer Street. Nobody knew about it, okay? Here we are on a Monday night after the 4th of July, and we're talking about, what do you think, okay? Now, Matt, I know you're doing your best, and you get your orders from City Hall, but anything I've ever seen in this community, right, has been organic, all right? Tommy Butler's dad worked on the Hall Road, okay? And this came out of the community's idea. It didn't come from central planning, it didn't come from City Hall. People in this community knew that that Hall Road needed to be built, okay? So when you guys come and put bus lanes down Summer Street and don't tell anybody, right, and say it's a done deal, I mean, everybody I know, you pissed off, okay? And I don't know if am I alone here? No. Okay? I don't want to like blow you up or anything. You're a good guy. I know you're a good guy. Tommy speaks very highly of you. I respect Tommy. But the reality is, like, you know, you gotta include the neighborhood. You can't just stuff this stuff down people's throat and say, oh, it's federal money, it's a Green New Deal, you know, this is how it's gonna be. That's not how it's gonna be, okay? Because if this was ever tried 20 years ago in this community, right, it would not have happened, okay? So, you know, again, the community has changed, it's transitioned, okay? Now, these roads have been here for how long? 100, 150 years? And all of a sudden, you guys are just, we're gonna redesign everything, you know? But I think if you get some more community input, I mean, the bike lanes, you know, I don't think they're going anywhere. You know, you're trying to do a good thing, people want to do an alternative transportation, right? But I talked to you previously, and we said, how many buses went down Summer Street before your pilot program, right? And we said, I think, what was your number?
So the numbers are being consistent throughout the pilot. It's about 140 in-service buses.
All right, so the 140 before pilot, right? So here we are after your pilot, right? And there's still 140 buses, right? And you can't deliver any new buses. That's the MBTA's job, okay? So as much as you'd like to like produce 20 more buses a day, you can't do it. So, I mean, like, I think he just said you're putting the cart before the horse, you know? We want to work with you, all right? But we don't want stuff down our throat either, you know? I mean, like, I just hear from everybody every day, like, what, this is insane. This is crazy, you know? Like, just get the community input, work with the community. Again, the Hall Road was a 30-year project that came from the community. It was organic. It wasn't like, hey, like, you know, we got this great idea, we're gonna do this. So, I don't know, that's just the way I'll leave it, but I know you're trying to do the right thing. I'm not, you know, again, don't take this personally, but, you know, I can get a little heated sometimes.
No, you didn't know. That was very good. I appreciate that feedback, right? Like, it's
Yeah, I
good
mean,
to know-
seriously, like, you know,
Yeah.
we're all trying to do the right thing, I know that.
No, it's good to know when, you know, our process didn't work well, we didn't reach enough people, so that's really good feedback, and we'll certainly be out, you know, when we come back to do something else, we'll
I
meet
mean,
about
when we
it.
first put this in, I don't know, in the winter, and there was no talk about this thing, right? People were like, what is this? You know, and only now we get a discussion about, like, you know, I don't know, it just seems backwards, you know what I mean? And I think, like, it's a good way to stuff projects down people's throat, and I know what happened in West Roxbury, they weren't too happy with what would happen, and I think that's gonna end up sticking. I don't wanna see that happen here. All right? Thank you, sir.
Sir in the back.
Hi, I was here a little bit earlier. I didn't realize that the presentation was going to start later than 5. So I apologize if this is already addressed. Was there any data on bicycle infractions on the road? I don't want to sound like I want to nitpick or be petty, but I had read through a lot of these poster boards when I showed up earlier, and it says that the Vision Zero is a commitment to eliminate fatal and serious traffic collisions. And in my personal experience, I generally find that a lot of mishaps on the streets are human error. People speeding, people on their phones, bicyclists not going on the right way or crossing or not abiding to lights, even at red lights or green lights. Guys blow past all the time. I personally, it may be different for everybody, but I personally have had more close calls because cyclists will blow through a light when I have the right of way at an intersection. But I think that the narrative that reducing drivers and driver speeds to avoid collisions. Obviously, the impact of a collision for a cyclist is much more potentially fatal, but I think it's important to also realize that without proper, I don't want to say trafficking or citations. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying that human error, stuff like collisions will always happen if not everybody is following the same set of rules. As somebody, and then separately, but kind of still to this whole point, I'm sure this has been echoed by many people here. I also drive down Summer Street quite a bit. I quite frankly, at Melcher A, Pump House Road, I feel like an idiot when I'm waiting 2 lights to go forward, but it's backed up because of left turns. And quite frankly, I've seen Boston Transit, I've seen C6, I've seen state police, I've seen more often than not, it's just other random drivers just blow by in the bike lane. When bike blow by was maybe not the right word, but the point being that when it was safe to do so, people would just go around. On First Street, the bus lane ends. If I were to go right to pass anybody waiting for the intersection, and then if a car turns, I now have to change back in, stopping traffic behind me. Sorry, I don't want to be too scatterbrained, but I feel like, as you guys said, it looks like your data suggests that the amount of time saved for buses is not very feasible, or is not very significant, right? Yes, no, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. So the data around buses was relatively inconclusive. Again, it was within what we would describe as the margin of error. Some slight time savings, but not a substantial amount in the sort of 15 to 20 second range. But no, I appreciate your feedback, because I think there's some feedback about some very specific locations and intersections. And I think we'd like to hear more about sort of some of that feedback. So happy to.
I mean,
yeah.
well, like, one thing I just wanted to say was, like, if we want to curb drivers' habits, speeding and whatnot, then we should address speeding. A relatively minor unpleasant bump on a bus, if there's speed bumps for a bus, buses should slow down too for speed bumps, right? For safety for people on the street and whatnot. If you want to curb speeding, you should curb speeding, not eliminate half the lanes. It's kind of a solution to a different problem, and you're kind of hoping for a secondary effect, which is quite silly. But yeah, I just wanted to ask. I didn't know if there was any data on, number of tickets or bicycles that are cited for improper, not following the rules of the road too. Which I just looked up on the City of Boston website, which lays out that it has to follow the same rules on the road as a vehicle.
So I don't have data in the presentation about specific citations for cyclists, but I can certainly look into that and see if we have any data either for Summer Street in particular or in the district as a whole. Because to your point, that data is recorded when there's a citation issued, and it would be good to see exactly what data is available, but we haven't looked into that yet, so appreciate that thought. Sure, start sitting down.
In September, you had mentioned that you're making a potential decision. Is the decision going to be a yes or no decision? Is there a potential decision that we're going to delay this and continue to collect data and redetermine if it makes the most sense?
Yes, I think there's a few different options on the table, right? So we genuinely want to hear back from everyone and hear your feedback, but I can see 3 potential outcomes, right, for this project. One outcome is, it's great, it's working well, and we're going to keep everything. That is probably the least likely outcome at this point. The other outcome is everything is working terribly, we're going to take the entire thing out. I'll say that's probably also not an outcome that's likely at this point, because we do see that there's some stuff that's working. So there's a middle outcome, which is that we're going to make and propose changes. And so what those changes are, I think there's a few different things we're going to look at. So one potential type of change could be like time of day changes. So maybe the bus lane only operates during certain times of the day. Maybe there's other things that we look at changing, like where and how intersections operate, and make very technical but very important changes to some of those intersection operations. Maybe there's other things that we look to change around where pedestrians can cross the street, how they can cross the street, and so forth. So we're going to look at all of that as part of this data to be able to make a determination. And it's going to be a very numbers-based and also a community conversation-based approach. Sir, stand me up in the back.
Absolutely, Matt, how are you?
Good, how are you?
We go back to the public library, we went to a couple of meetings in the early part, correct?
Oh, I
First got
remember that,
talking. We've seen the same data here for an awful lot of months, it's the same thing. And I like how you opened up on your history lesson about the ball field down there. But do you know what's across over here at the K Street Firehouse?
What?
Used to be a livery stable. That's right. All those horses, they kept in the livery stable. They used to take all the buses and trains and trolleys and pull around South Boston. But they had to feed the horses hay or data. You know what happens to hay and horses? You know what it turns into? I think we all do. And I think that's what this is. We keep pushing all this data and all this consumed affair onto the people of South Boston. They always have. And yet we have elected officials here that we go to the polls to vote for. Every November or every other November. They're the ones who are the voices. They're the ones who stand up for what they see in their constituents. That's their job. They represent us. They've told you how they feel. We've told you how you feel. And I have to ask you one thing. What's your data around the room about how you feel the consensus is? Because I think you already know.
So again, this is our third public meeting. We've heard a number of different responses from folks. Some have been positive, some have been neutral, some have been negative. But like, again,
Do you think it's 33% all the way around the board?
Do you think I said that?
Well, you said some.
But again, when we think about roadway design, we're sometimes not going to be the most popular people in the room, because sometimes we have to look at things like safety and having things that are safer, which may not be the most popular. I'm not saying that we're going to go in that direction for this project, but at the end of the day, we need to hear community feedback, and that's one part of what we're looking at. We also need to look at the data and understand what the data is telling us, what safety is telling us, what standards from the federal government or from national associations of transportation officials are telling us. So we're going to be looking at a variety of different things for this project, and it will be heavily based on what we hear from the community, but it's also going to be based on the technical standards and data that we collect.
Okay. So basically, that's not really telling us that you're not putting us in the category of the main concern. You're concerned about federal numbers. Your main concerns are what we feel, what our representatives feel. There's a reason why we vote. We go to vote because we want these people to represent us. They know our feelings. They're the ones who stand up for us. So where do you not take this and you look around the room at the people who are opposed to this here, and it keeps going on? And you've heard their consensus. They're opposed to this. Do we can we find a better solution? I think we all need to. I think as Mr. Ferrara said just a few minutes ago. Okay, people are tired of having these things pushed down their throats day in and day out. It goes all day long. And that's the city of Boston's agenda, the renew agenda. We keep pushing this on people. And we're not taking into account the people here who attend these meetings. They've taken the time out. They just came back from their 4th of July weekend. And we had, it was held last week, the 27th, I believe. I couldn't attend that, you know. We do have personal time. But you have the day after everyone comes back to work, we're not fools. We haven't been fools for years, and I think it's very, very disconcerting that you do this to these people. I think it's disconcerting that you reject what these people want to tell you. As our representatives, they tell you they're opposed to it. I hope that next year, it's, from Mr. Lynch's office, the same thing, and Ms. Welch. I believe that this is what they're elected to do. And they're telling you they're opposed this year. We want to find a much better settlement, but this is not working. I think you really have to take that back to City Hall.
Yeah, and certainly we will. And I think we're here to hear from you. We're here to hear from the community. We're going to be listening to all voices. And again, it's going to be an important part of the consideration here about how the work lays out. And
it should be the main point. It shouldn't be just the point. It should be the main reason.
Again, we're here to listen. We're not just here because, I don't know, we want to have good Chinese food and hang out, right? We're here to listen. So, like, that's very much what we're here to do. I apologize if I'm not saying this as articulately as I should be, but, like, we are very much here to listen.
All right,
but
great.
we'll be looking at data. We're going to be looking at all of our analysis. Sir?
A couple bits of feedback. I mean, before I go into some other points, I think to improve as a 7 bus rider, the majority of delays comes from the South Station intersection. I think improved enforcement for people blocking the box or blocking an intersection like the other cities do that we're modeling our new modes of streets by would be smart. Because that's where the significant delays for these buses actually come from. It's not from the traffic on Summer Street. It's from the intersection by South Station that people block. That would probably vastly improve the number 7 bus on time. My wife and I both live in Southie on O Street. We both commute out of the city every morning. It's easily added 15 to 20 minutes each way to our commute. So the 40 to 90 second thing, I don't know where that's coming from. It's very disappointing. It hasn't been reduced. At least the intersection at Pump House in Summer has been reduced by 2/3. There used to be 3 lanes, 1 right turn lane and 2 straight lanes. So it hasn't been reduced by 50%, it's been reduced by 2/3. 66, whatever. I'm not great at math.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's 1 lane, it used to be 3. And the right turn there, if there are some compromises to be had, adding back the right turn lane at Pump House and Summer would be, I think, a huge improvement from the current state. My bigger concern is, my wife and I love living in Southie. We've lived here for quite a while. We didn't grow up here, but we love it. And things like these projects, are a tipping point for us to leave. And there's a lot of beautiful young families in this neighborhood that think the same.
Exactly.
And my concern is that more young families that we want to stay in this neighborhood and keep it as great as it is are gonna leave.
Yeah.
And that's gonna create a huge tax problem. The city of Boston is already twice as dependent on commercial real estate taxes than any other major city in the United States. There's just an article in the Globe on it. Commercial property tax problem is, because of work from home, is already a major issue. And I already know that the residential tax exemption for all us residents is probably going away. And as little as this pilot program may seem, it has a much bigger impact long-term on South Boston and Boston as a whole. And that's my bigger concern over just the personal inconvenience of an extra 15 minutes in the morning on my commute, and my wife's commute, and everyone else's commute. And then the last portion of feedback is the trucks going into the terminal need to take a left, and they need to get into the center driving lane to take a left, which is not the bus and truck lane. So I think that should be taken into consideration when you guys meet and take the feedback, because the trucks have to turn left, and they have to be in the middle lane. So now, what are people supposed to do? Sit behind the trucks trying to take a left so the buses can pass on the right? You're gonna have a real problem with compliance there. We already do, so I think that should be taken into consideration as well.
You brought something at the beginning of the conversation, which was the intersection of South Station and Atlantic Ave and Summer Street. So back in 2019, we installed a 1 block long bus lane between Dorchester Ave and Atlantic Ave on the inbound side. And as part of that, we were also able to move the bus stop. So the bus stop for South Station used to be located all the way back by Dot Ave. We moved it all the way up to closer to the Red Line Head House. So people had an easier time transferring, an easier time getting to jobs in the financial district, and so forth. And that seemed to work very well. So we've run that now for the past 5 years. Obviously, there was a dip during COVID, but we are looking at solutions like that around the entire city and trying to understand, based on these pilots, and based on the data, where these things can work. So that's certainly a point taken. We are looking at downtown and how buses can flow better already as part of a separate project. And so we'll be looking at more improvements to that intersection in the coming months. Going back to your other point of trying to measure the data. This is data that we got from commercial GPS systems, so it's based on an average. And it's not to say that the worst day is not substantially worse than it was before, but that wasn't the way that we collected the data. What we were looking at is a typical Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and trying to assess the change in a trip time based on a typical Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday during the AM peak and the PM peak. And then we also have data from the midday as well. But this is from, again, what we were able to collect through these commercial GPS systems, and if the data that we collected has holes in it, I think we'd like to talk to you. We want to understand what your trip time's been and understand what the sort of, if that's an outlier or if that's actually something that we need to consider in more detail.
Don't forget.
Thank you. Sure, ma'am.
If you could just visualize Summer Street, Pump House Road. Okay, our driving manual, which I did look up, even though I've been driving longer than a lot of people in this room, still says you cannot take a right-hand turn from the middle or a left lane. You have to be in the right lane. Now, because of that bus lane, and I go on the Mass Pike east and west constantly, I am supposed to take a left, take a right there with a 40-foot bus coming down. That is a disaster in its making. That if I get caught in that bus lane, I guarantee you I'll probably get a ticket. And yes, I would fight it. Think about the intersections. Think about that type of traffic. Think about the laws of, you were talking, sir, about raising families here. Eventually, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds are gonna start driving. Manual still says you cannot take a right from a left, but yet you're forcing this on them. It's already hard enough for a new driver. I would hate to be a new driver. Think about that. Think about our manuals. Think about new drivers. Think about what you're doing. That's all I'm asking.
No, and thanks for the question. So if you go on our website, what you'll see is how to make a right turn, like by merging into a bus lane. And so we've received feedback that some signs are not as clear as they should be. Ideally, what you will do is you drive up and you'll see the sign that says merge here to make a right turn, and you'll merge over to make the right turn. To your point, if there's a bus there, you will have to wait your turn for the bus to go by. And I understand that that's different than what we've had before, but that's the new standard that we have both in the city of Boston and the state and also at the federal level for how you do side running bus lanes. Could they be clearer? Yes, and we've certainly heard that, and we're looking at making improvements for how to make that right turn more predictable, that have better signage. We've implemented some additional turning arrows, but we know we can do better. And if we decide to move forward with a bus lane project in the future, we'll certainly be looking at signage and making other improvements like that. So really appreciate your feedback there. Glenn.
Hi, Matt. I would like to see a pause on this pilot program because we're talking environmentally, you brought that up. So we're hurting the environment because on our side of Summer, all the way down to L, up to the circle, we're backed up in the morning. Some of that is our South Bostonians trying to exit or get to a different part of South Boston. Others have cut through traffic. I don't know why we can't keep cut-through traffic on the highway. Mass DOT, I believe. Connie, if you can help out at some point, why we can't keep the cut-through traffic on the highway versus cutting through. But I've asked this question at least 6 times to you, and you were bringing it back. And I don't know what happened. I don't have an answer still. And what I suggested as you're coming down Broadway to take that right on L, so that's 2 lanes right now. That should be a right-hand turn only at L and Broadway. And then
from M Street from the hill?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Right-hand turn only. Right.
I can look into that for sure.
Technically, it's only. But people use it as to.
Yeah.
But so now when they're getting on the number 7 bus there and you're going up to South Station, that's also backing traffic all the way down L Street. And it looks like, once you get up by the convention center, it looks like the city had a sale on white paint. It's like, I'm dead serious. If you've been driving, well, even new drivers, we don't know how to navigate those roads. We don't know what backward arrows mean. We don't know merge right, merge left. Maybe don't. I don't know. And then there's this little bicycle sign that's in a light pole that I never even saw. I almost took out the bicycle going into the convention center because I didn't even know they existed. So I've had conversations with Yasha and the police department. What are the rules for bicyclists? Because when I'm going down Broadway, at D and Broadway, I've almost wiped out 3 separate bicyclists. I have a green light to turn onto D Street. Why am I looking in my rearview mirror? It's just happened.
D in Broadway or D in Summer?
D and Broadway, and the
Okay.
same bicycle behavior.
Oh, okay,
I
gotcha.
almost wiped out 3 of them. Because why am I looking in my rearview mirror? I have a green light to turn right? So you're talking about enforcement. We have a Boston City Council, the majority of them, okay, want to reallocate funding, they want to defund, so we're not getting more police. And the police that we have, we need to fight crime, right? So unless somebody's gonna get some dollars to bring in, are you all set?
Sorry.
Sorry, another time being speaking.
So unless you have dollars to bring in more police, so we have traffic police, the enforcement is a joke. The other thing is that if I'm sitting behind, so you told me before, trucks and buses can use the car lane, but the car lane can't use the trucks and bus lane. So again, environmentally, you're backing us up, and in reality, I'm going to use whichever lane is open, I'm telling you right now. I'll take a ticket, I'll fight the ticket, but that's what I'm going to do because it's my right to drive a car. And I feel as though BTD and administration, the goal is to have fewer cars. And with that happening, that's affecting our quality of life. Like this gentleman just said, as president of the City Point Neighborhood Association, I've just lost 3 families. They've left South Boston. Parking, transportation, schools. So this feeds into that, like this gentleman is saying. So again, you're listening to our feedback, right? And you've been listening to it for years now, since it started. But we're not seeing any of the changes that we're putting forward. So what I'd like to see is a pause, and for you to bring in community members as a roundtable to say, we're finding this as a problem spot. You people live here. Where do you think we should go with this? What's your input into this? And I get you're all the engineers, but the computer program doesn't always match the reality. The Omni Hotel, bike lanes on that sidewalk, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. If we could do that, I would have no problem with bike lanes. And then you give us back our lane for cars, and everybody's happy. But the time that you're saying is saved for buses, it's irrelevant.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. Apologies, I'm getting over a cold. But anyway, thank you for the feedback there. I really, really appreciate that. Thanks for hosting us at the City Point Neighborhood Association meeting. I think we were there 3 times, so really appreciate that. We're hearing your feedback, and we are here to listen. So thank you so much for that, and thanks for sort of giving that feedback.
When do we see our...
Answer one more question. What's the process after this? Is it a tyranny after this? Is it a vote? Or what's the process? Is it just the commissioner? What's the process? We've asked a number of times, can someone in the community be involved in that decision making? And that went on deaf ears. But what is the process after this? Is it just, we'll listen, but we'll do what we want? And right now, we don't want, nobody wants times. Because if they're going to do the bus lane time, they're going to do a 6 to 10 in the morning and 2 to 6 in the afternoon. It's going to defeat the whole purpose of not having a lane. But what's the process after this? And can we have a vote or somebody sit in on that?
Yeah, so the process at this point, we are going to be taking all the data that we've gathered, understanding exactly what the data says, listening to the community, both here in Fort Point. We had a virtual meeting as well. We had thousands and thousands of comments. We're taking all of that data, and we're going to create a recommendation. Now, that recommendation is something that we're going to vet across the sort of different agencies that are involved with this, and we'll come out to the community again with that recommendation. So that's the process right now. We're not going to hold, we typically don't hold a formal vote on a roadway redesign effort because that's just not department policy. We haven't done that historically, but we do want to listen and we do want to hear your feedback. So we're genuine about that.
That's a recommendation before they implement?
So yeah, we'll be back with a recommendation before any substantial changes are made. Are there going to be like spot improvements? Sure. I mean, because we need to make spot improvements, but before any substantial changes are made, we'll be listening to feedback. Sir, I apologize, ma'am. He has his hand up.
Hi, my name's Robert. I'm with the Marine Industrial Park Association, but I grew up in Boston, and we rode bikes, and we had to learn how to ride them safely. I'm a big advocate for safety on bikes. So whatever we can reasonably do to have bikes safe, I'm all for it. But then the word reasonable comes into play. So is there data on the last 12 months in the city of Boston, how many accidents there were between a motor vehicle and a bicycle? How many fatalities? How many injuries?
So to give everyone some context, the city of Boston has what's called the Vision Zero policy. So the Vision Zero policy, the goal of that is to have zero pedestrian, zero traffic, zero bike fatalities on city streets. So the way we design our roads is very much based on that in mind. I don't have the data in front of me tonight, but we can certainly get it for everyone, and we can give everyone an understanding of what the number of fatalities have been, both from a traffic, biking, and pedestrian standpoint, so everyone has some context of what that looks like, and we put it up on our website. Behind Mike, on the back, is a board that describes the Vision Zero process and policy. So if you want to learn more about Vision Zero, it's right back there as well.
All right, so some of the screens show Summer Street, and pretty much in every one of them I saw a truck in the car lane. Now, I've been driving a truck for 40 to 50 years commercially, and what I've noticed is the signage on Summer Street for this pilot program is not reasonable. And most drivers aren't going to think that a bus lane allows trucks, because it's very clear on buses and it's very not clear on trucks. And that creates a failure just for your pilot program, because most of the drivers wouldn't drive in the bus lane because they don't want to get a ticket. Now, if you have two lanes that are active and then you make it one lane that's jammed up, one lane that occasionally gets some activity, that's not fully utilizing what resources you have for transportation, right? So is it possible, and I've tried to say this before, is it possible to say, okay, let's take the bus lane and not have it a bus lane. If you're going to do that, have it buses, have it trucks, the large trucks, but also small trucks, all commercial vehicles. So the commuter lane can lighten up. And it's a lot easier for people not to be sitting behind a truck or a bus. It's a lot more comfortable. And if that was the case, you might be able to utilize both roads and maximize efficiency in vehicle transportation and commuter times. So commuter times become unpredictable when you have jammed up roads. And a lot of the businesses probably have seen employees come in frustrated, they're late. If they're hourly employees, they don't punch in until they get there. That costs them money. So this pilot program for some people has had an economic impact. It's probably impacted businesses as well as the people that work in those businesses. Has there been an economic study done?
So just getting back to your point about the signage on Summer Street, and I'll get to the economic analysis in a second. So what we did was we worked with the Marine Park Business Association to understand exactly what signage could be. This is not to say it's perfect, and we're very open to ideas for how to change it. So Tom brought this up earlier, brought the idea of actually adding truck into the paint on the lane to better identify it. So we're going to be looking at ideas like that as we move forward. But this is what the lane says right now. Bus only, commercial trucks okay, 10,000 pounds gross vehicle weight minimum. So 10,000 pounds, as we've been told, identifies sort of the distinction between a box truck. So anything larger than 10,000 pounds is roughly a box truck. Anything lower than that is like a Ford F-350. That's about 8,500 pounds. So the way we made the distinction was with that 10,000 pound vehicle weight limit. And if you're a commercial driver, our understanding was you would know the weight of your vehicle. And so that was how we made the distinction. Now, again, could these signs be clear? Certainly. And we certainly want to identify ways that we can make this signage clear, more predictable, more understandable. That's the first thing. The second thing is we've had a major enforcement issue with these bus truck lanes, right? We have not seen a lot of respect with them. So that's been an issue with our data, and that's been an issue with the success of the pilot. And I will fully admit that. We've had a number of lane violations we've identified through our traffic counts. And just if you go up to Summer Street, you will see those lane violations. Would I like that to not be there, for this to be better? Yes. And I think that would have given us better results with the pilot in terms of bus travel times and in terms of trucks. But either way, that's sort of the way that we're looking at this. To your question about economic activity, we haven't done an economic study. We typically don't do that for our roadway projects. But we could certainly look at things like point of sale data to understand how the businesses are doing on Summer Street and get a general understanding of that. We haven't done that yet, but we can certainly look into it.
So another small point is, what category are these electric scooters on? They go 20, 25 miles an hour. If a car hits a person, a pedestrian, at 25 miles an hour, half the time they're dead. Well, what happens when a scooter hits a pedestrian? Is there data on that? What category are they in? Are they in bicycles or are they in motor vehicle category because they're electric? They're not pedal. But bicycles can go fast too. So, the concept of planning for the future, it's very important, and it's very good that the city of Boston is looking at it and trying to make sure things are going to work 5, 10 years, 20 years from now. Very important. And safety being part of the process, I commend that for sure. But we do need to have common sense. And I think the people in this room were able to articulate that being stuck in traffic, because we see it all the time. People are just stuck, and the lights, even Seaport Boulevard, Northern Ave, when you look and say, okay, certain times of day, I'm going to start from one and go to the other, and it takes you 1 hour, that cuts into people's lifetimes, and if they've got kids or if they've got daycare, they've got to get to it, they get fines. So there's a lot of implications when things don't flow. So I get the concept that we want to have steady flow, but this example has demonstrated that there's more jam-ups and aggravation flow. So the quality of life issue is a factor. The bus lanes, is it possible that taxis, Ubers, Lyfts, and small delivery trucks could use it also? Even funerals, could funerals use it also? Because it's when it's empty, that affects the other lane. How do we maximize it so that you're maximizing the road systems you have for the best outcome for not only the commuters, but also, we want this city to be inviting, right? We want it to be tourist friendly. We want, a tourist dollars to come into this area. How do we not demonstrate this is a difficult place to travel in as a tourist as well? So the businesses, you look at all these restaurants that all over the Seaport, all over Boston, transportation is very important for them. And so economic impact is a big one. And so I think that's enough, and I don't want to take up any more time, so thank you very much.
Is there anyone who hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet? So 2 more questions, and then I apologize, but we do have to start wrapping up because we have to get out of this room before we have a certain time limit. In the back, and then we'll go to...
Okay, I just have a couple of quick points, and then I have a question for you, because we are so late, and we are all worn out. I live right down Broadway, and I would dispute all of the transportation information that's being provided. It's untrue. I can count the cars like what was done today, and the numbers that you are giving us are incorrect. I live right there. That's just my point of view. My big issue is we're not taking into consideration all of we are not taking into consideration all of the development that's coming into Summer Street and Pappas Way. We have the Edison. Mr. Boynton, you can say it's coming right around the corner. Our traffic is going to come to absolutely, it's going to become stagnant. So everything that was presented tonight by my neighbors was definitely educational for you, and I hope that you, number one, will put a community member on your boards, put subcommittee members in so that we can have some discussions, because what has happened now is wrong, and you haven't given us an answer. We've been going with this program since November of 2017 is what you said. We are supposed to have definition by the end of the pilot program. I'm confused as to whether or not we are going to have a solution, or whether or not that it was discussed earlier, whether this is going to continue, because we need to either stop it because it isn't working, or make a decision. We can't be meetings and meetings and meetings. We need to come to a decision, and we need to have community members on board to make those decisions. So thank you.
come in.
Then last question, please. Please close this out.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for hearing me. When you talk about the bus lane and us taking, that lady's left, a right at a traffic light where the bus and the tractor trailer trucks are using. And on any given day, I have been stuck behind 3 or 4 tractor trailer trucks. If I'm trying to take a right-hand turn, is that tractor trailer truck going to yield to me? Probably not. And what happens is, and I've noticed, is that we have so many traffic lights on Summer Street that for me to get through a light, if there's a bus and 2 tractor trailer trucks, I'm not going anywhere. I'm lucky if 1 truck gets through the tractor trailer truck, gets through the bus lane. Anyway, I noticed that the traffic lights have extended their time and the green lights have become shorter. Right. And we're sitting and we're emitting, the emissions that we are emitting is harmful to the environment. And so, Boston has a green initiative, but this is counterintuitive. And, the traffic lights in front of Pump House, and then you get to the traffic light that's at D Street, no turn on red. Do you know how long I've had to sit there to let those wait for those tractor trailer trucks to get through there? And then once they get through, they've got another traffic light. At where the bus, the number 11 bus comes through. Get through that, there's another traffic light. You go to turn onto, I forget the name of the road right now, to get to 93. There's another traffic light for the parking garage. Then you get another parking light to get onto 93. In the meantime, I'm sharing these roads with these tractor trailer trucks, and it is dangerous. And not to mention, extremely frustrating to try and get to 93 when you've got all these traffic lights that are not timed properly to facilitate the flow of traffic. So, that's another consideration you need. I mean, right now, to take a right on, from the left-hand lane, the amount of room that you have to do it is so limited. And you're backing up people. People are backed up behind you as you're trying to get to turn right from the middle lane. So, there's more things that need to be addressed than what I've seen today. And in order to make it more enjoyable to live in the community, because I do feel that people are going to leave because we're not getting anything more. It's being taken away from us. And the right lane has always been the bus lane. And now every intersection is no turn on red. You can't even turn right on red to go into the FedEx parking lot. It makes no sense. And that used to help, right on red, help facilitate the flow of traffic and reduce the amount of emissions. So, to live in our community, you'd better get a better understanding of what we experience on a daily basis. All this stuff is, it looks great in a presentation, but it doesn't relate to our reality in our daily lives. So, nice job. Thank you for hearing from me.
I appreciate that very thorough description of your experience, and I do appreciate that feedback and that context. So, just so everyone knows, I apologize, we are going to be losing the room soon, so that's why we're starting to pack up. But I'm very happy to hear your feedback individually and hear your feedback throughout the next few weeks and few months as we try to come to a determination on this pilot. So, as I said, transit@boston.gov is going to be available for everyone who wants to send stuff to us. My coworker Lydia is here, who's at the South Boston O&S route. Feel free to communicate with Lydia and she can pass it along to me. The survey is closed at this point, but again, please reach out to us individually. We will get you feedback either through this transit@boston.gov, or we're happy to come out to a civic association meeting or another neighborhood meeting over the next few weeks, next few months to hear your feedback and understand what you're saying. So thank you again for your time tonight, everyone. Really appreciate it, and we'll be talking to you all soon again. Thank you.